Hey everyone, welcome back to Josh and Ferd vs. World.
Hello, hello. I hope you guys are doing great today. We are doing pretty well, I think. Are you doing all right today, Joshua?
Honestly, with everything going on right now, I would say that it's 50-50, just like how this trade war is going to go with China. Not to get too much into it because we really have quite the doozy for you today.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Quite a doozy.
But if you want to just hop right into it. So, right now, the world's bracing for market turmoil after the U.S. hits China with 104% tariffs in midnight ultimatum.
Now, have they applied that? Because I believe it was an additional 50% on top of what we had already applied to them. Is that
I believe
already
the
enacted?
104% is the total. I believe the 50 is already enacted. And then China's response then led Trump to, well, Trumpify it. And let's just say, are ultimatums ever a good thing?
They don't feel good, that's for sure. They definitely never feel good. And I'm sure China is not feeling very good about it.
Well, China's not feeling good about it, but 104% tariff on any good coming from China, that's saying that an iPhone would go from $800 to $1,600 just on tariff.
We better get them American plants up and running.
Yeah, but that's going to take like 3 to 5 years. You're talking about a 100% for tariff overnight that's going to take effect immediately.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Trump quoted it, or he said that it would take no more than 2 years, but we do know that he has a tendency to over-exaggerate, so
Really?
Maybe a slight tendency.
Yeah, Trump is known for that. Well, let's see. JD Vance is, we'll see what he has to say about this.
I think it's useful for all of us to step back and ask ourselves, what has the globalist economy gotten the United States of America? And the answer is fundamentally it's based on two principles: incurring a huge amount of debt to buy things that other countries make for us. And to make it a little bit more crystal clear, we borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. That is not a recipe for economic prosperity. It's not a recipe for low prices, and it's not a recipe for good jobs.
So what they're saying is basically we're borrowing money from the suicide nets people.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, it's and if you look at it the way that he put it out, it's what we benefit from our trade up to this point, our trade agreements with China is at the complete detriment of the Chinese people, it would seem.
Well, not the detriment. They're getting quite a few jobs. What is it, 11.7 million jobs based off of just the U.S. markets alone for what we do for China?
Well, yeah, but how much are they getting? The reason that these goods are so inexpensive is largely it's not because it's easy to ship it to the U.S. or cheap to do so. It's because it is incredibly cheap to manufacture with, in some instances, slave labor.
Well, I was about to actually get into that with, do you think these jobs that we send over to China for manufacturing they would be high-paying jobs in the United States. We know they're probably not the highest-paying jobs in China. So basically, we're shipping our high-paying jobs overseas for low-paid workers, very near slave-level wages, making pennies on the dollar. And then now we're not even going to see those products cheaper anymore.
Yeah, which hopefully that incentivizes, once again, more domestic production. But, the time frame would obviously be the issue on that.
And, before we get too much more into it, one thing I would want to say about that is, we didn't get ourselves into this situation overnight. It's not like the U.S. was just decided that we were going to sell out manufacturing, that we were going to get rid of all of our plants and sell them overseas, and then all of a sudden it happened. No, we made laws throughout the years, and we changed our entire global trade system to basically ensure that happened, that we sold American manufacture overseas, and to try to basically influence countries in power. We'll get more into that in the video later. We have a guy that we're going to reference who does a great job of summarizing this in the neoliberal world order. It really started with Nixon and Reagan. Nixon taking us off the gold standard, and Reagan basically taking us to
zero standards.
Personally, I think Reagan is probably one of the worst presidents that we've ever had. I think that if you actually look at his policies and the long-term implications of what Reagan did in his 4-year term, he basically destroyed, an entire generation's ability to produce and prosper, right? Like, if you directly follow the things that Reagan did into 2025, you will see China is like the leading world order in power. They're the leading manufacturer. You see a U.S. that's struggling. The only influence we have is our markets, not our manufacturing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. We deindustrialize. I think it's from the 50s up until now, we have been in basically a constant downward slope in our industrial power.
Very brief respites where we went back up.
Yeah, but overall, it's almost a sheer decline into being weak and feckless.
It almost makes you wonder, why do all the immigrants keep coming into the country if America is taken advantage of so much? Are we really that much better?
I mean, well, up until recently, we gave a lot of benefits to illegal. Well, I mean, asylum seekers, I think, was the primary guise for which we are benefiting the massive immigration of late.
What's crazy to me is that this trade war so far has wiped out $10 trillion of value off global markets. That is an insane number. That's 1/3 of the U.S. deficit just got wiped out. Of global markets, not the U.S. deficit.
Now, I wonder where that value just disappear?
Yeah, it's stock market, dude. Just gone.
Yeah, I guess,
you ever seen the South Park video or,
yeah,
it's gone.
Yeah, he puts in his, like $100, and
yeah.
he's like, and we're putting it overseas, investing in this, and blah, 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 and it's gone.
Sorry, sir, this line is for bank members only.
Oh, God, yeah.
And then yeah. So, I mean, that's basically what's happened to that money. It's gone. No one has it. It's not in debt. It's just gone.
Well, I guess it was was only prospective wealth to begin with.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when you go into a bubble and people keep selling off at a loss, I guess technically that money has the chance to come back because stocks fluctuate, right? That's why rich people look forward to dips like this, whereas, the main people it really hurts are like people that aren't millionaires or billionaires yet, but people that are making probably over 6 figures a year that have things like their retirement invested in a stock portfolio. Those are the people, because they're going to be much more likely to look at their retirement plan and be like, shit, I need to do something about this before it's dry. I want to retire at some point, and they're going to see that their money's all wiped out and it's all in stocks. And if they pull it out, then there's no chance of recuperating it, but it's also still playing a little bit of a lottery system because if your portfolio continues to do poorly, yeah, that money's just gone. It's gone.
Well, and
sorry, sir, this stock portfolio is for stockholders only.
Well, and it's interesting you say that because there seems to be a huge disparity in the reaction to these this trade war stuff between the generations, like older people who have their retirement based in the stocks and anyone who owns anything of significant value, houses and whatever and this and that, people who have significant financial investment are the ones who are upset about this, but people of our generation, Gen Z, for example, the people who are set to inherit the country that we're creating now, don't have any of these investments. We don't have many, if any, real tangible reason to be extremely upset about the stock market.
Well, if anything, it's kind of an opportunity for younger people such as myself who aren't yet fully invested in the stock market to buy in at a dip and with the chance of an increase, because it's still a gamble, and there's still a chance that we could lose money, or that I could lose money if I were to say invest now. But knowing how stock trends typically go, buying at the dip is usually recommended. I mean, look at how many different millionaires have made, or billionaires have made millions of dollars just holding onto their stocks when it dips, and then they don't sell off because they can afford to. And sure enough, 3-4 years down the line, their portfolio's up 50% or whatever it is, and they've not only recuperated their losses, but are now well into the green.
Yeah. Now, I did see another really interesting criticism about the stock market issues that are being caused, and that is that so when you're talking about buying in the dips, right, which is mostly ideal, what we've seen to some extent up to this point is that when these dips hit, it's not young people like us who are buying up the recently dipped stocks. Who it is are the people like millionaires and billionaires,
the George Soros types,
who have tons of expendable cash to just immediately throw into these stocks when they dip. And then it brings them back up, but it's these millionaires and billionaires. So if you're talking talking about, trying to benefit the little guy, the middle class,
the small
right?
fry,
the small fries, right? In that sense, right? There's a huge issue with the tariffs going and the stock market problems, because it's just opening them up for even more egregious acquisition.
Well, it's just one of those things. It's really hard because all of this really is just speculation. This is a complete, new global trade world order is what's being set up right now as we speak. We are living history, which honestly, after COVID, I felt like I was done with. I was like, man, I'm living through an event in history. This is going to be taught in history books. And now Liberation Day, which, first of all, think about that in a kid's history book when they're learning about that growing up. On, what was it, April 2nd, 2025, Liberation Day.
Yeah, it's very, very patriotic, very, we're getting stuff done, we're solving problems, we are liberating ourselves from this this horrible world order that we've been under.
Well, I can definitely tell that we're liberating the stock markets from a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah, and consequently, unfortunately, potentially liberating a lot of stocks from the people and putting them towards the corporations. But we'll see.
So a big part of what I see with this 104% tariff midnight ultimatum. So China wasn't just implementing a trade war per se. They were also basically saying that they're willing to now sell American or to manufacture just straight American IP and to just have IP theft with American products. So that's always been a problem with China. It's one of the things that helped propel them so quickly into the state they are now, is they stole a lot of technology from a lot of different countries to increase the productivity of their manufacturing and the quality of the products being manufactured. And now what they basically said is the gloves are off. We're not protecting any American IP in our country anymore. And if these companies in China want to locally produce these American products for the exact same specs and standards, no more knockoff iPhones. It's now just going to be Chinese iPhones.
Where did they state that? Like, was that in an official press conference, or is that just?
I'm trying to remember. We actually don't have the source for that pulled up. So for now, I'll just say it is the word on the street. But It is a pretty loud word. I've heard it from a few different sources. Like I said, I'm just off the top of my head right now struggling to come up with them.
Now, so I believe that they did hold a press conference where China made an official statement on the, at least with their official reaction to the ultimatum and the tariffs. I believe we have that video pulled up.
Wait, what was that one?
Where the actual representative from China was holding a press conference.
So this is that one right here. This is going to be brought to us by the BBC. I do apologize for the terrible quality. For some reason, BBC only uploads their videos to YouTube in 480p.
Yes.
But we'll go ahead and give this a watch.
Beijing's Commerce Ministry accuses the Trump administration of blackmail and says his tariffs are a typical unilateral bullying practice. China's Foreign Ministry has held a news conference and said trade wars have no winners.
The U.S. abuse of tariffs seriously infringes upon the legitimate rights and interests.
That's
okay,
not what
this is a trend. I'm sorry. I just had to pause it here. Why do they have to use like a female translator for a male? I feel like this is a pretty new thing.
It's a little jarring in this, especially in this video, because that's definitely not what that guy should even remotely sound like.
Yeah, no, not at all. Anyways.
But see, you watch a lot of anime, so I think that you might be used to them actually matching the character, matching the dubs to the actual characters.
Dude, no, this is just like not only does it obviously very clearly have a super delay, it's just jarring to hear what sounds like a young girl talking while an old man is standing there. But all right, let's hear him out.
Of countries violates WTO rules, hurts the rules-based multilateral trading system, and destabilize global economic order. It is a typical move of unilateralism, protectionism, and economic bullying. It is rejected by the whole international community. China strongly deplores and firmly opposes this. Let me stress once again that trade wars and tariff wars have no winners, and protectionism has no way out. The Chinese people never create trouble, neither do we fear trouble.
China doesn't create trouble.
No trouble at all?
None.
Is that from the tap?
Do you think the Uyghurs might have something to say about that?
The who?
The Uyghur Muslims that they sent to re-education camps and
I
exterminated.
believe those are pronounced Uyghur.
Are they?
No, I have no idea.
I'm
But
pretty sure it's Uyghur.
it sounds way worse the way that you're saying.
That's literally what they're called, is the Uyghur Muslims. Like, I don't know what else to call them. I mean, you know.
All right, that's we'll just.
But
run
yeah,
with that.
apparently China has not offended anyone.
No, certainly not. Certainly not. They don't commit any extreme actions. They don't release viruses into the world, causing mayhem and
then
destruction.
lie about it to the world.
Yeah, they don't do anything like that.
Yeah.
They don't cause. China simply does not cause problems.
No, not at all.
According to China.
According to China, which you can only take as credibly as you can from a communist source.
Yeah, you might have to take it with a slight grain of communism-approved salt.
That's a good way to put that. And I was going to also say, a communism-approved salt, you're more likely to just get a very slight grain if you were looking for it. I would say to actually really swallow that pill, you're going to need a lot of communism-approved salt.
Yeah, you are. Quite
China number one.
You're going to have those salt mines running 24/7.
Well, I mean, look, so it started out we imposed a 10% tariff on China originally when we had talked about Mexico, Canada, and China.
And that was just arbitrary. That wasn't reciprocatory at that point.
I think it was to bring our tariffs up closer to what China was charging us.
Yeah.
So at the time, China was charging a 34% tariff on imported U.S. goods. I believe that's what it was originally, while the U.S. was charging under 10. Okay. And so we brought it up. I believe it was around 2.5% was our original tariff, so almost nothing. But I mean, that makes sense with them being the main importer or America's main import is Chinese goods.
Yeah, cheap plastic crap.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, though, is it's really not anymore. I mean, at this point, that's what I was, talking about with IP theft, is China's already pretty much geared and ready to produce things at the same quality that we are used to, if not maybe even better. We don't have this manufacturing capability in America. China does. China is the manufacturer for American IP. When a company creates a new product, they go on SCAD or whatever it is, they draw out the designs, they send it over to a manufacturer in China, and China makes it.
Yeah. Well, when you don't have quite as big of a focus on human rights and livable wages, your manufacturing can, I'm sure, be quite efficient.
See, but the problem is that we've seen countries that do have that, aka America, circa 50, when we started deindustrialization. We not only managed to benefit from rights, but also cheap American products. So it was possible at a time in our country. Yeah. And I don't think it's impossible to get there. I always feel like the powers that be want things to stay the way they are so they have the same level of control and power that they do. And with a new order potentially coming up, they lose that power. So what are they going to do? They're going to dig their heels in, and they're going to make sure that things stay similar. And a strong American industry for the rest of the world is kind of scary, because if America can go back to what it was pre-World War II even and be just producing for itself, that would be, I would say, America after the Great Depression, right around the time of the Great New Deal, when America really started to come back up as a manufacturer again. If we could get back to that level of manufacturing, we could almost be in the same level of isolationism that we were pre-World War II, which was basically we had started the League of Nations, but it had already failed, and America was back to, we don't want to get involved in European and Asian politics. We're just going to do our own thing. And then obviously a world war stopped that. Now, you could draw a lot of parallels to where we are now and pre-World War II, which is kind of terrifying. Could a trade war develop into a hot war?
Well, I mean, let's see. Let's finish hearing out this young Chinese gentleman and let's see what...
And this young Chinese lady.
Pressuring, threatening, or extorting China is not the right way to engage with us. China will do what is necessary to firmly safeguard our legitimate and lawful rights and interests. If the U.S. insists on waging the tariffs war and trade war, regardless of the interests of both countries and the international community, China will play along to the end.
So, back to your question of whether or not it could turn into a hot war, I think that that statement right there says a lot. I mean, it would appear that to whatever end may be necessary to continue and to at least attempt to win a trade war with us, I think that they're willing to go that distance, is what it would seem. And that may be a war.
You know, I've seen a lot of things basically talking about China's military as a paper dragon, and partially that is true. You know, they've sold a lot of military equipment to countries like India, Iran, and Pakistan, and a few others. And basically the reports back have been anything that's been field tested is that they struggle with reliability and actual functionality. So, you know, part of a war is obviously going to be having good equipment. Now, that being said, I think if China was to actually go to war themselves, that battle testing and modifications could be made pretty quickly to get the equipment to a more reliable standard. And China just has the manpower to wage war for as long as it would basically take to get to that. And especially with a communist state, you know, look at Russia right now. Do you think any of those Russian soldiers, very few of them are actual career soldiers that want to be there? I think it would be kind of a similar thing with China and America. I think that, you know, we have a few career soldiers that would want to be there, but the majority of our military, if we had to go to a hot war with China, the draft would have to get instated.
Well, perhaps, but do consider this, that the last time China was directly in a near-peer conflict, if I'm not mistaken, was the Korean War, right? When they were supporting Korea with, I mean, we were literally directly fighting the Chinese about halfway through that war.
We were able to push them back to the parallel, but then we saw like the number of forces amassed there were just so great that America went into peace talks. Well,
yeah. So, but that's the thing is, it has been since then that they've actually been in anywhere near shape or form a near peer conflict, and that's been a long time. And America, by comparison, I wouldn't say so much near peer, but we have been in conflict through the entire period of time that they have been not in conflict. So I would say either way, I would imagine that we are better prepared for direct conflict than they are.
I just, you know, if it gets to that point, we're both nuclear armed superpowers. You know, it's different than when you're talking about like Ukraine versus Russia, which is more of just a proxy war. Now you're talking about a just straight up head-to-head hot war, you know, which I could see happening from this trade war. You know, when they talk about they'll do whatever it takes to ensure China's interests, if that means leveling both countries to the ground, somehow that doesn't feel off the table for a communist state. Man. Or even America at this point, if I'm being honest.
Well, and I also think it's their response is certainly a bit hypocritical.
100%, but it's China.
Mainly because it's like, you know, like, oh, how dare you, America, do things for your own interest against us, a country who is notorious for doing almost everything for our specific interests. Like it's like you're fighting fire with fire.
Yeah, a little bit of one, a lot of the other.
Yeah, so we'll see.
A little give, little take. All right, well, I think that's it for this video, though.
Yeah, let's see. Oh yeah, so this is the gentleman who's gonna help explain the nature of where we're at and where we're trying to be.
Yeah, and we can go from this, and then we have another video so this will kind of give us an understanding of where we're at. This is Marco, or Money and Marco. We'll leave a link to him at the bottom of the video.
Money and macro. I'm assuming as in like macroeconomics.
A little bit of dyslexia there.
Yeah, something's wrong. That's for sure.
All right. Well, so he's going to break down the neoliberal order. So let's go ahead and watch this quick segment.
Dilemma. You see, as the global economy grew, the need for dollars increased, but the quantity of gold was relatively stable. So to keep the global economy growing, the US either needed to choose to keep creating more dollars, making the gold standard less and less credible, or to keep the gold standard and kill global economic growth by stopping the creation of new dollars that the world needed. This ultimately led to the following iconic announcement by President Nixon in 1971.
Thanks, Nixon.
I directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
Which was then followed by a period of global economic turmoil, after which the neoliberal world order was ushered in by Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. This neoliberal world order was characterized by Number 1, lower tariffs. Number 2, lower barriers on investment around the world. Number 3, flexible exchange rates. And number 4, the US guaranteeing security for everyone that at least played somewhat nice with the United States.
Now, let me go back to that so we can go over this list a little bit. So,
there we go.
There we are. You know, and so this was enacted by Reagan. Again, going back to why, you know, this all, you could make an argument that a few of those are good things, and you can make an argument that that's why we're where we are now in America, and that, you know, a mix between terrible policy from Reagan and Nixon led us to basically, well, we have control over the world. Our economy has shrunk the entire time, relying on the value of the dollar instead of the value of the things that we produce for ourselves, and sold that ability to all these countries overseas and used flexible exchange rates basically to buy their products from them. Kind of what, you know, that original video is talking about with JD Vance, where he's like, we're literally borrowing money from Chinese peasants to buy the goods that they produce.
Yeah, well, and the primary benefactor of a policy like this is ultimately going to be the consumer through the prices of these goods that they're experiencing. And
in
it's
the
like,
short term.
Yeah, in the short term. And then there's, with something like this, there's no purview into, you know, how that changes us as a country and how that reduces our power as, you know, I mean, that's the thing. It's gotten to a point where we are experiencing almost exclusively the negative aspects of this kind of policy.
Right, yeah. The short term is well and over with Nixon and Reagan. It's 40 years down the line from Reagan, and it's over, 50 years from Nixon, because it was 71 with Nixon and it was 80 something with Reagan. So, you know, we're well and far removed from those short-term benefits of these trade and you know, the neoliberal world order. And now all we're basically facing is the deindustrialization of America. We have China trying to be the rising superpower and take control of the world, and America doesn't have the manufacturing locally to actually support a legitimate trade war. So now we're hampered by policies of the past. You know, it's one of the reasons why our generation's not better off than our parents' generation for the first time in American history.
Yeah, and we've witnessed, so like that's the thing, is that we have witnessed the failings of this type of global trade policy. And the only prospects for, you know, going forward have been basically keeping it the same. Like there's been, and that's, I think, where a lot of, you know, the popularity of Trump's, you know, current policy pursuits are coming from, is that like it's obvious that something needed to change.
Yeah.
I mean, it's because, and the only people other than Trump are people who have really set out to continue the status quo. And I think that's where a lot of his popularity generally even has come from.
Well, let's see. He kind of breaks this down a little bit more, so we'll keep watching a little bit more in this video.
Played somewhat nice with the United States. In line with its free market principles, the neoliberal order was far less structured than the Bretton Woods order. There was no formal agreement now in which countries promised to use US dollars. They just did so because it was the most convenient.
So just to break down what he's talking about there real quick, to break up any confusion, there was a previous order before that, and what it required was basically your fixed trade to the dollar, that if you were a strong ally of the United States, that you would allow us to set up military bases in your country, and you know, if you were an ally, basically it was, I believe, free trade or low tariffs. So, you know, what they were talking about is how that restricted growth on the global stage is if you entered into that agreement as an ally with the United States, you had to fix your money to the value of the dollar, and that was limited by the stockpile of gold that the US had, which backed the dollar at the time. So to increase the amount of dollars and to increase the amount of flow of money into the world, Nixon cut us off the gold standard, which allowed for growth in the economy after a few years of fluctuation, because obviously taking us off the gold standard, there was a lot of speculation and stuff that it would crash the markets, and it did for a little bit, and then the markets rebounded, and then the markets really rebounded, and then America, you know, was able to take advantage of that. So we'll continue here. Unless you have a... All right.
And most reliable currency out there. However, in this system, any non-US nation had a very strong incentive to hoard US dollars by making it easy to export to the US and making it harder to import from the US. Notably, despite praising the virtues of free trade, the World Trade Organization did actually allow developing nations to have higher tariffs against the US than the other way around, precisely because the US hoped that by making the world richer, it would become friendlier, just as has happened before with Germany and Japan.
So you hear what he said there, like what we stood to benefit from those actions was not really a significant fiscal benefit to us, but it was the prospect that, oh well, if we scratch the back of these other nations, they will also scratch our back.
How's that worked out?
Well, so we've continued to scratch since the 50s.
I like this metaphor.
And our back is really itchy. I'll just put it that way. Our back has remained incredibly itchy, and every time we try to scratch it,
I'm liking this metaphor less.
Every time we try to scratch
making my back itch.
I know. Every time we try to scratch it, it's heavy-handed and this and that, but it's just because we're so busy scratching everyone else's back, and we can't even look after our own back at this point.
Yeah, when you try to make everyone happy by giving them money, well, I would just put it like this: do the kids of spoiled rich parent, or do the spoiled kids of rich parents typically find themselves grateful to their rich parent?
No.
I've met a lot of kids that have grown up with privilege where they're struggle to be grateful for basically anything because they've had everything handed to them in their life. So if America's just handing out give-me's, trying to make them friendly to us, why are we surprised that as soon as we were like, hey guys, we can't really afford to do this anymore, that everyone's like, basically freaks out like you're a parent taking the TV remote from a kid. Like, you can't do that.
Well, because we've allowed them to build their own economies like exclusively at our expense.
Yeah, they structured their economies basically around taking advantage of the American system that we set up, which it's one of those things. It's like we set it up to help benefit y'all, but with the idea that you would become friendlier to us, and then these countries did not, and sure enough, here we are, and we're finally doing something about it, and everyone's basically saying how this is terrible, and that the U.S. needs to focus on the world and not the U.S. And well, there is a partial truth to that because it's a globalist country now. The world is so interconnected. It's also doesn't tell the whole story because countries need to be able to focus on themselves to grow and to fix their internal issues. And with how much money we spend globally, it's really difficult to justify any actual spending to really help American people when we're giving billions or trillions of dollars away to other countries.
Well, and if you want to put it in the terms of like the Chinese gentleman / lady said, is that we're participating in protectionism. And it's funny for them to complain about that when it's like, okay, well, what we've been doing up to this point is protectionism for everyone else. Like it's
part of the neoliberal world order was that we would be the world police for free. We would just fight everyone's battles for them. Don't worry about wars. Don't worry about anything else. Don't worry about peer-to-peer conflicts. America's going to come in and we're going to handle it.
Right, but God forbid that we implement any type of protectionism towards ourselves. And although there are some downsides to protectionism, like in the sense that if you prop up businesses, for example, if you prop up businesses that aren't able to function and sustain themselves of their own volition without said support, right? The likelihood is that business is going to degrade in quality. It's going to become fat and lazy, just to put it in layman's terms.
The average American?
Yeah, which is a part of why our manufacturing is so crappy, because it's like, it's anything that we've been able to barely scrape up as far as manufacturing, we ultimately have to re-support it, and then that's part of the reason why the quality of American-made goods is
well, I wouldn't say always
shoddy.
Quality. There's quite a few American-made parts, whether it's for cars. A lot of it's going to be the aftermarket stuff, things that are made not necessarily in a factory, but say on a lathe or in a CNC machine. We do have a lot of high-quality machining tools, and we can produce some pretty high-quality, like American still produces high-quality tools, some high-quality automobiles, and a lot of technology. Now, the thing about technology is that even if we are producing it locally in America, most of the chips and everything that's being put into that is imported from overseas, which, is that double-edged sword. So it is being produced in America, but we're using global supply chains to acquire all of the materials, the raw materials, the, or somewhat processed materials, whatever it is. They have to go through global supply chains to get that. And so it's, no matter what, you're having to change an entire system with these tariffs to make us to make us self-reliant. We have to start basically mining again, drilling, and getting rare earth minerals from American sources, and then we have to set up the factories to actually produce those make those raw materials into usable, like silicone for chips, or
Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe there's already been pledged investments for that kind of stuff.
The problem is a pledge investment is not an immediate thing. It's not going to see an immediate, it will have an impact in the future, but that's the future. And right now we're talking about these tariffs, and they're going to happen tonight at midnight. That's not very far in the future.
That's true. That's true.
So we're talking about something that could take years to set up. Talking about manufacturing and global supply chains changing, that takes years to adjust. I mean, even just going off the gold standard, there was a period of turmoil following that where there was an adjustment, right?
Oh, well, certainly. I mean, that was a huge shift.
Yeah, it was right around time, too, about the gas crisis in the 70s. So there's a lot of things happening then, and there was a lot of economic turmoil that followed. And now ultimately, and then there was prosperity, and now followed by a downturn. Now we're suffering the full effects of America's power with the markets is not what it once was, and we've been deindustrialized pretty much completely. It's kind of sad, too, kind of going into that. This is more anecdotal than anything, but living in Alabama and just driving around, I'll see a ton of shut down old factories. There's still quite a few factories, but there's also quite a few, and I'm sure you've seen them too, of those giant buildings that are just abandoned.
We used to be a mill, I guess a paper mill town for the most part. I'm sure we had some other stuff, but yeah, I mean, it was in a lot of the houses that people are living in now, like in our local 5 Points area. A lot of those houses were built by mill houses, and if I'm not mistaken, the house that we are currently in was...
And not only that, but we also had NASA in Huntsville.
Yeah.
So a company like NASA, they bring manufacturing, they bring all these, well, maybe not as much manufacturing, but engineers, scientists, all those jobs get brought in, and we still have those things, but to the same degree as is kind of the question. And then I'd even ask this, if we go to Tesla, how much of, actually no, I would say Tesla probably manufactures their rockets in the US, but that's not a guarantee.
Well, I mean, apparently, the whole idea now is that Elon's trying to replace NASA with SpaceX. Is that not the case?
No, because NASA's a government. NASA's part of the government, and SpaceX is a private industry.
I know, that's what I'm saying. But I've read that is an assumption that's made towards him recently. So that's
there's
one
a
of his
lot
goals.
of assumptions that get made towards Elon Musk, and the problem is picking through what's bullshit and what's real. So that's with anything nowadays. It's always fun trying to funnel through what's bullshit and what's real. Do you think there's anything more on this video we want to keep going?
No, we can move on.
All right. So I think the last thing on tariffs, because we spent a good bit of time talking about that, we'll break it down. Its lead into it is first on illegal immigration, and then Carolyn Levitt here is going to go into the tariff situation straight from the horse's mouth, the White House press secretary. Now, whether or not you find this is a reliable source, but it is straight from the horse's mouth. So we watched the Chinese representative. Now let's see what the American representative says.
Last night, the Supreme Court delivered a massive legal victory to the Trump administration and allowed us to continue removing foreign terrorist invaders under the Alien Enemies Act. This was a smackdown to a rogue left-wing, low-level district court judge who have relentlessly tried to stop President Trump from using his core constitutional powers as head of the executive branch and as commander-in-chief. The highest court...
Okay, look, pause. I know she's talking about something, but just this gentleman right here, I feel like he's staring into my soul.
He is. That's what he's doing. Does that look like a man who is not in the practice of staring into souls?
Well, it looks like an angry man. Now, do you think he's angry because apparently America is not using due process to get rid of these illegal immigrants? That's according to some people that I've.
I mean, it just depends on how much of the constitutional due process that is afforded to American citizens. Depends on how much of that they are entitled to.
Where was it? I thought I had an article pulled up on this, actually. Yeah, here it is. So do illegal immigrants actually have constitutional rights?
Mostly no, I would assume, being that they're not citizens. But I bet there's some overlap. I bet they do have some.
So they have, I believe, the Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights. So if they're being charged with a crime, so like murder, can't say the other one. YouTube doesn't like that word apparently, but the R word, they would be able to actually be protected with the Fifth and Sixth, saying that if you are accused of crime, the United States will appoint one for you and pay for it. But that only applies to criminal proceedings in the state or federal court. For example, if you are charged with assault, murder, or robbery, or the other R word. However, undocumented immigrants who face deportation, the law is different. Basically, just to summarize, is that the United States does not have to provide you with a lawyer, that you can get a lawyer to fight it, but it has to be at your own expense.
So that seems like more of a civil type of proceeding.
Yes, they put it under a civil proceeding, not under a criminal proceeding. So while we do say, a big buzzword is that illegal immigrants are here illegally, aka they've committed a crime, deportation is handled as a civil matter with the government, meaning that they are not afforded the same liberties that they would be if they had actually committed like a crime against an American citizen. Now, what I feel like that kind of points out is that, look, you're an illegal immigrant. The Bill of Rights is meant to protect American citizens. We'll protect some people under the Bill of Rights, but you can't expect to be afforded the full Bill of Rights as a non-American citizen that's not here legally. You basically came into our country however you did, whether it was flying and overstaying a green card or crossing the border illegally. You made a conscious choice to stay past the time that you were supposed to, or to come in here when you shouldn't have and not wait or go through the proper channels. And
so
then,
do you have the full breadth of rights that as like a green card, if you are here legally on like a work visa or whatever, like while you are here under a legitimate visa, are you afforded the rights? And then does that end once your visa ends?
Well, let me actually see here. So let me pull this up over here. So that way, our visa holders.
I would assume by comparison that they mostly do have the rights of an American citizen to some extent, minus the right to vote and other things.
Ugh. Trying to type like this is difficult. So, okay, nope. Visa holders, same thing applies to them. Fifth and Sixth Amendment is basically what I'm reading here.
So unless they actually commit a legitimate what would be a crime by American standards, they're not entitled to due process. Is that what we're seeing here?
Yeah. Apparently also, so let's put this up here so that you can see it. So when non-citizens have First Amendment rights, so this is just going over the First Amendment, freedom of speech. So, and then also when they don't. So religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. A tourist visiting from Canada may attend their preferred religious service and can't be prevented by the government. Speech. A musician from India may tour a country performing songs that are critical to U.S. foreign policy without fear of being punished. Press. A person from Kenya studying in Indiana University may work on campus for a student newspaper and has the same free press rights as any other student on the campus. Assembly. Someone born in the Philippines with legal status under deferred action for childhood arrivals.
So anchor baby.
Yeah. And then petition. A refugee from Haiti may ask the government to extend the length of their temporary protected status to make it easier for groups to get TPS and simply the process for citizenship. So when they don't apply, The Constitution does not specify whether the First Amendment applies only to its citizens. Rather, those who wrote it talked about the people at the time of the Constitution as written. Many of the people were born outside of the young country. Whether someone is fully protected by the First Amendment can depend on their legal status in the country. Such differences include natural born or naturalized citizen, lawful permanent residents, so these are green card holders, so that would answer your question there. Authorized non-immigrant workers such as H-2A, H-1B visa holders, student visa for business or tourism, deferred action for childhood arrivals, DACA. I've heard that before. I didn't actually know that's what it stood for.
Yeah, that's what the anchor baby policy is DACA.
Temporary protected status, refugee asylum seeker, and unauthorized immigrant. So let's say unauthorized immigrant because this is going to apply more.
What? It's just talking about the First Amendment. Is that going to apply to the other amendments as well? All of what they're saying? Because it looks like they're just referring to the First Amendment.
In 2015, the Department of Justice argued in a federal class action lawsuit that unauthorized immigrants do not get First Amendment protections. The DOJ reasons that the Supreme Court previously suggested the First Amendment and other protections apply only to immigrants who enter legally and who have sufficient connection to the U.S. To date, the Supreme Court has not ruled definitively on the question. Some legal scholars and federal judges have argued it does not apply to this group of people. Others have argued the opposite, citing the Supreme Court's Citizens United ruling that opposed restrictions on political donations based on the identity rather than content. And I would not use Citizens United as any source, because if you want to get people to dig into Citizens United,
well, let's
that's a video for another topic. But
so basically what we're saying, just to summarize it, is that as an immigrant, unless you are naturalized or you have committed actually directly committed a crime outside of, the crime of illegal immigration, that you do not, those are the only two that get any type of rights: naturalized and crime committers. And it's only due process for the people who commit the crimes, right? So other than that, any other form of immigrant does not
that's pretty much it on this
enjoy
article.
the rights of an American citizen, or is not entitled to them. So that would mean that, in effect, it is it's legal for them to send. Well, okay, so have they undergone a civil process to be sent to El Salvador? Is the question.
Yeah, that was the getting their records and figuring out who they are, and then I do think they are processing them. I'm not sure exactly how that's happening, but it's not like they're just showing up to just random people's doorsteps. They have specific people in mind.
Right.
I know a lot of them have been already previously arrested and then released. They're mostly going at this through sanctuary cities still, which are cities like New York, Los Angeles, where even if an immigrant gets arrested, they're quickly released back onto the street with little to no bail required, and then just allowed to keep doing what they're doing, and typically they go and can hide or whatever it is. And so now ICE is going after those individuals and targeting them mainly in the beginning, as well. And now I think it has broadened out more to just illegal immigrants, and there has to be some level of research to figure out who these people are and that they're here illegally. And I haven't heard a lot of illegal immigrants saying that they should get their day in court, basically. I haven't heard anyone talking about wanting a day in court, because what are they going to say? I'm here illegally. I want to stay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, if the ultimate action is going to be deportation, why go through the process to get the answer that you already know that you're going to get?
Yeah. And I mean, for some of these people, maybe they can afford a really good lawyer who could argue asylum or a different reason that might get them to be able to stay. But I would say
they would already have come in under the guise of asylum.
But as we already read, since this is a civil proceeding, the government does not have to buy or to provide or pay for a lawyer for you. So if you want a lawyer to fight this immigration, you would literally be paying out of your own pocket. And considering that a lot of these illegal immigrants cannot afford that, they're just going to end up having to defend themselves or just accept it, basically.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Let's continue watching.
All right.
It was
Court in
supposed
the
to be a
land made
brief
it clear
interruption.
that the President of the United States has the power to protect our homeland and forcibly remove foreign terrorists who pose a grave threat to families and communities. Thank you to the Supreme Court for upholding the rule of law and protecting the Constitution. Our message to the monster Tren de Aragua and MS-13 terrorists still hiding illegally inside our country is clear. Deport yourself now, or you will be locked up and sent back to your home country. On another matter, the historic Liberation Day announcement last week by President Trump made it very clear that the era of American economic surrender is over. President Trump is no longer going to allow American workers and companies to be ripped off at the hands of foolish trade practices that shipped away millions of high-paying jobs and hollowed out communities across the country. It's America first, all the way. And despite fear-mongering by the media, the world is clearly responding to President Trump's approach. Just yesterday, President Trump held a bilateral meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu here at the White House. The Prime Minister pledged to immediately eliminate America's trade deficit with Israel and remove their trade barriers. Israel's proactive approach should serve as a model for the rest of the world. Also yesterday, the President spoke with Japan's Prime Minister, who wants to negotiate as well. The President also spoke to the acting President of South Korea this morning. He has tasked Secretary Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer to lead these talks. In total, since the Liberation Day announcement, nearly 70 countries have already reached out to the President to begin a negotiation. Countries are falling over themselves to reform their unfair trade practices and free open their markets.
70 countries have reached out for negotiation. Now, I did look at the tariff list, and it was quite a few. There's quite a few countries on that list. And, I think negotiations have to happen, but the main person or the main country that America needs to negotiate with, in my opinion, is China. And right now, it's quite the opposite.
Yeah. Well, so and that's understandable to an extent, because one thing that I don't remember if we watched it or not, but one thing that the Money and Macro talks about is the fact that this is the initial phase of the plan, right? Like this is the beginning, and you gotta understand that the way that Trump is using these tariffs is not, it's multi-tiered, right? Like he's not just trying to achieve one thing with the tariffs. He's effectively using it as a normal tariff, right? Just to actually incentivize, domestic production, right? But he's also using it as a punitive tool, right? As a direct backlash to what he states is, unfair tariffing against us up to this point. But he's also using it as a negotiation tool. So that's the thing, is his approach is really, like I said, it's multi-tiered, and there are multiple.
Don't forget about
outcomes.
Secondary tariffs, like against countries that do business with countries. Like I think the sanctions on Russia and Iran, we put secondary tariffs on the countries doing business with them.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's just one of those things where it's he's trying to, like, this is only one, what we're seeing the result of one of the things that he is using the tariffs for, which is as a punitive measure, which is that's what we're seeing right now. And of course, there is backlash as a result. And if I had to guess, I would assume that the next phase is going to be as leverage, right? That's what he's going to use it for next. And if this is true, what they're claiming, which is what 70 nations are coming to the table, right? And apparently that, is going to increase, I would assume.
Well,
but either way, that's we're in the first chaotic part.
So there you go. There's your keyword there. We're giving our Bassett said Trump is better than anyone at giving himself maximum leverage. So Trump said, straight from the horse's mouth, they're trying to get leverage here. That's what this is about. Hopefully leverage doesn't crash out the economy. And let's hear a little bit more of what Carolyn Bassett has to say.
Markets to our
Levitt,
country.
my bad.
Why? Because these countries greatly respect President Trump and the sheer power of the American market. These countries realize they've gotten filthy rich over the past few decades by imposing substantial tariffs on American-made products products and ridiculous non-monetary barriers to block out American industry. The jig is up. Past American presidents sat by and let this happen, but President Trump stood up for our country, and he is saying no more. The president's message has been simple and consistent from the beginning. To countries around the world, bring us your best offers, and he will listen. Deals will only be made if they benefit American workers and address our nation's crippling trade deficits. America does not need other...
I do kind of, that's the first thing where I can look. If we're going to make a deal here, Trump's made some deals in the past. He loves to say that his deals are always the best deals. A good one with this is when he was talking about who made that terrible Canadian trade deal, the most recent one, and it was him. And then you can literally cut to a clip of him saying, I made a deal with Canada. It's the best deal, basically. So take it with a grain of salt. It could, Carolyn Leavitt could be right, and she also very well could be wrong. It's not communist salt, luckily, but it is salt. You do need to take it with a grain of salt.
Big grains, not small grains.
Other countries as much as other countries need us, and President Trump knows this. He's going to use the leverage of our markets and our country to the advantage of the people he was sworn in to represent. On the other hand, countries like China, who have chosen to retaliate and try to double down on their mistreatment of American workers, are making a mistake. President Trump has a spine of steel, and he will not break, and America will not break under his leadership. He is guided by a firm belief that America must be able to produce essential goods for our own people and export them to the rest of the world. A strong America cannot be solely dependent on foreign countries for our food, medicines, and critical minerals. And America must always maintain a robust defense supply chain.
That's true. We have been very reliant, especially the medicine stuff. I mean, that's part of the reason why we have such a huge issue with fentanyl, is because in addition to all the medicine that we're having to ship from, guess who? China. They're also through the same avenues getting fentanyl into the U.S.
Well, fentanyl is not just a recreational street drug. Much like, most drugs, it was meant for a medical purpose at first. When I went to the hospital and I was given a painkiller, it was fentanyl. Yeah.
And they use it for anesthesia as well.
Yeah, but it also is the leading killer of young Americans still. So, fentanyl's a hard one, man. But besides fentanyl, yeah, we do most of our drugs and manufacturing for our medicines is made in China, and that is something which almost baffles me. With the amount of money in American pharmaceutical industries, you would think that they would have the more capability to produce the drugs here locally in America, but and maybe some of them do. I would like to think that some that's probably why some of the more notable store brands are probably more expensive. But I also would like to know, because I don't know, does medicine have a made in America or made in China on it?
No, I mean they just ship in. It's not like they press that designation into each pill, and they just I would assume they ship them in bulk. Giant crates or containers just of straight pills.
But this trade war, man, I don't know what to think about it. China has absolutely taken advantage of America. There's no doubt about that. Given the position that they were in when we basically started this and the position they're in now, we're in pretty similar positions. Both of our economies are way down. I would say that we weren't in great places to start with. America's dealing with a real estate bubble, a stock market bubble, massive inflation, massive increase in the price of goods, massive increase in the price of food, and we hadn't recovered from that at all. And now we're looking at potentially massive increases on the price of all consumer goods, which would absolutely transfer into food, electricity, because all of the components to maintain our infrastructure, a lot of them are made in China.
That's true. Well, if you think about the effects of the neoliberal world order and the effects of the policies underneath said world order, right? What has happened is like I've said, it's been a decline in American producing power or manufacturing power, right? And then it's been ideally a benefit towards the American consumer. So we've made a trade-off, and we moved in one direction with one thing and the opposite direction in the other. And if you think about what he's doing right now, it's effectively, he's almost trying to just go in the opposite direction, right? Yeah. Where we are benefiting, it's going to be an attempt to benefit the American producer, right? But unfortunately, that has to come at the cost of the American consumer. I mean, that's just unfortunate. That's just how economics works. And if you're going to do, like I said, you can destroy our manufacturing capability and our overall strength as a country as a result, just so people have better prices and cheaper goods, you know, and or you could strengthen our manufacturing, and in the short term at least, yeah, you're going to increase the prices, and you're going to, you know, the American consumer is going to have to take a hit.
It's just I guess the question is, and you know, can we afford to right now?
No, I don't think. I think that it'll be tight. It'll be tight. I think the possibility with the current, you know, national resources that we do possess, I think that it is possible. Not to say that it's not a slimmer chance than not. I think it is, but it still very well is possible. It just all depends on how these negotiations go, really.
Well, let's see how she finishes up with China, and then I think we got one more story to wrap it up with.
Yeah.
Reprioritizing and strengthening our manufacturing industry are essential national and economic security issues of the utmost importance to President Trump. By focusing on supercharging the onshoring of American manufacturing, the president is already delivering on his promise to usher in an economic golden age for our country. Just look at Friday's jobs report, which smashed expectations for the second straight month. The American economy added 228,000 jobs, nearly 100,000 more jobs than economists predicted, and the fourth highest month for private payroll growth in the past 2 years. There was also a sharp increase in transportation, construction, and warehousing employment. And in just 11 weeks, President Trump has secured more than $1.5 trillion in private sector investment. This is $500 billion more than Joe Biden secured in his entire term. This record-breaking private sector investment will create roughly 350,000 American jobs and counting.
So I would like to talk about that real quick. It's not just because people are saying that they're going to invest, we need to actually see that before we can brag about it, in my opinion. You know, if a company says, oh yeah, we'll invest $1 billion or whatever it is, $50 billion, $100 billion, you know, saying that is one thing. Well, actually following through with it is another. So, you know, what she said is they've pledged to invest that money. That means that money has not been invested yet. So, you know, there's one thing that I would say is maybe wait to see how that goes before you try to. And it very well could be that we end up getting that money, but it also could be that they pull out, right? Yeah. Especially if the world economy is collapsing, it might de-incentivize them to set up shop in America, which would be a very costly endeavor. So, you know, I think that's
Well, Trump, I'd say this to respond real quick. I mean, Trump is indeed a very braggadocious person. So, I mean, to say that he wasn't going to brag about it, I think would be not true. He was definitely, the moment that those figures came out, that's all he's been able to talk about is how all of the investments, there's tons of money coming into the U.S., you know.
Yeah, with the fist up.
But we'll see. But point is, if it does turn out to be true and they do invest, that's obviously very good. That's very, very good for us as a nation.
Dude, Trump has aged so much in just what looks like a couple months since he took the presidency.
Well, he's got a lot on his plate, and the presidency is a daunting job.
Well, all right. I think it's finally time to move on to our final story. I'm sure a few of you have already seen this, but for those of you who haven't, we brought back direwolves from Game of Thrones, like into reality. They exist now.
I mean, that's pretty wicked. I wonder when. So what? I can't remember if it said or not when the last time that they were on this earth was.
It's been over. They have not.
Oh, so they haven't been
12,000.
12,500 years. All right. So that's obviously very cool. But my real question is, do you think that what was the impetus for them to do this? Do you think that it was the popularity of direwolves in Game of Thrones? Do you think that Game of Thrones brought back the direwolf?
No, I think Jurassic Park brought back the direwolf. Look, this is some Jurassic Park shit. I don't care what anyone tells me. They use DNA and CRISPR to basically produce direwolves, which, I don't know if you know this, but like at 5 months old, these pups were like 50 pounds. These are massive wolves.
Yeah. Well, I think it says that they share most of their genealogy with the gray wolf, or I guess by extension, the gray wolf would be the closest descendant of direwolves.
Thought there was the puppy pictures, But let's watch this quick little video on talking about it. Let's see what they have to say.
But it's a big talker lately. The woolly mammoth, the dodo bird, and the Tasmanian tiger have all been extinct for a very long time. But those animals of the past could once again roam the earth. And yeah, it sounds like Jurassic Park, but because it kind of is. Meredith Yeoman tells us how and why.
This scientifically is not only achievable, but it will happen. And
this guy looks like he would be the one who scientifically achieve it.
Yeah,
Dude, he's got the protection on his glasses. That does it for me.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if a gentleman of that nature showed up in any of the recent Jurassic Park movies.
Yeah. It does kind of have like a Jeff Goldblum kind of vibe.
He does have a Jeff Goldblum vibe. Mainly the glasses, because Jeff is known for wearing cool glasses.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And the nose kind of has a Jeff Goldblum nose.
Kind of.
Yeah, kind of. All right.
In the next few years, you will see species coming back from extinction.
The wild mission comes from a company called Colossal Biosciences,
CRISPR,
which is working to de-extinct the woolly mammoth, lost 4,000 years ago. Matt James is Colossal's chief animal officer.
We're creating technologies that are going to change tomorrow with de-extinction. But what's amazing is those technologies right now are making a difference to endangered species conservation today.
Using DNA from Asian elephants and DNA recovered from woolly mammoths frozen in the Arctic tundra, researchers at Colossal are using gene editing technology to change.
Hey, told you it was CRISPR.
Yeah, it's CRISPR. Well,
that's CRISPR.
And I remember reading about when they began the attempt to recreate the woolly mammoth. And I guess it hasn't happened yet. But
apparently wolves are easier.
I guess that's the assumption that could be made, that wolves have easier DNA. Their DNA they have one of the easiest DNAs to work with. Wolves are quite amazing creatures, one of the best creatures, and their DNA is, I'm told, it's one of the best.
It's the world's most endangered wolf now. There's only 3 of them.
Oh, gee. Yeah, I guess. But no, okay, so actually, I wonder if these are kind of a hybrid of a gray wolf and DNA from actual dire wolves, can you breed them going forward? Could you breed them into a more pure breed of dire wolf? Or is there not enough genetic material for that type of generational? I thought there was
a different video on this, but I guess not. That's a great question. I do not know.
Would they become incest wolves? If you tried to get the bloodline too pure,
Well, yeah, that is the problem with cloning, right? Is that it's the exact same DNA sequence. Well, not necessarily, because the way they're talking about cloning with CRISPR is they took a regular gray wolf, right? And then it got pregnant, and they edited the gene sequence of the pups to match up with.
Is that what they did?
Dire wolves. So yeah,
I would imagine they would. So wait, wait, you're saying that they genetically modified the developing wolf babies, or they genetically modified the material that went into the conception?
Oh my God, I was so wrong. At 5 months old, they are 80 pounds.
Oh,
that's a big wolf.
It's a big dog.
That's a big dog.
It's a big dog.
We've made 3 dire wolf puppies. There's Romulus Rexus, which are 5 months old and around 80 pounds. They're beautiful. And then there's Khaleesi, who's over 6 weeks old.
Oh, that's cool. They use the name from Game of Thrones. That's pretty sick. Now, here's another theory coming at you. All right, a hard-hitting theory.
I'm ready.
I think that my assertion that Game of Thrones was, the motivation behind creating these wolves, I have another point to make in that vein. I think that the future of these pups lies in cinema.
You think so?
I believe that they created, at the behest of George R.R. Martin, that they have created these dire wolves so that any iteration of them in any of the future Game of Thrones stuff, they will have actual dire wolves instead of, edited normal wolves. And I think that they probably funded it. And if you think about it, right, any other movie that might involve a woolly mammoth, right? The live action Ice Age, which has not been announced to my knowledge. Right? If they're going to make a live action Ice Age, what are they going to do? Right? See, the next thing that they're going to start doing is they're going to start bringing back the sloth, right, from extinction. They're going to start bringing back the saber-toothed tiger potentially. Why not? Right? If it's gonna if we're gonna continue on this stretch of live action, we're gonna need to start bringing these creatures back.
So here's something here that I was just trying to pull up so that you could get an idea of what a full-grown. So this right here is a regular wolf. This is a dire wolf, the middle one, and that's a saber-toothed tiger, just for fun. Because apparently, I'm sure that if we're not gonna stop at dire wolves, we're gonna probably have saber-toothed tigers soon.
That's what I'm saying, dude. It's gonna be Game of Thrones for the dire wolves, and then once they get that mammoth sorted out, right, and then they start working on the saber-tooth and the sloth, or that kind of sloth. No, I guess we already. I mean,
all I'm saying is if we're already using CRISPR to use gene editing to make these clones, why wouldn't we breed them to be very friendly with people? And also this massive, because you're not going to tell me.
I don't know.
You're not going to tell me
that
dog lovers would not want a friendly dire wolf like Game of Thrones.
Another theory: they're doing this so that they can sell these animals as pets. As merchandise for these IPs.
So like kind of like how Russia bred red foxes to be like over multiple generations to be house pets. You think they're gonna basically just do that all at once with the clones?
Yeah, except you can do it right out of the gate. You can do it right out of the gate.
Ah, okay. Wow, dude, that is just, I'm just blown away. So first of all, I mean, obviously it's 6 months old. They're already 80 pounds, which is probably coming close to what this wolf is. So they're probably already about normal wolf size, which is also why when you look at this picture, they don't really look too crazy big yet because they're still puppies.
Are those the direwolf puppies?
Are
those just...
Yeah,
those are it?
That's them. They're the ones being credited. Colossal Bioscience, the company making them.
Those are gorgeous creatures. Would you buy one, Joshua? Would you own a direwolf if you could?
Okay, so in the same... Okay, this is talking about...
You're not going to answer my question.
What was your question?
I asked you if you could own a direwolf.
Yeah.
Just for sure.
Yeah.
You would get one.
Yeah, as long as he doesn't eat me.
What about a pet mammoth?
No.
No?
Too expensive. I don't have the space.
Okay, so what... Okay!
If I did, maybe.
How do you know that a mammoth is going to be too expensive? Just because it's a bigger animal?
Well, we live in...
There's no precedent.
We live in America. It's hard to feed yourself, let alone a mammoth.
Okay, well, there's no... What I'm trying to say here, Joshua, is there is no precedent...
Not hard, but expensive.
For how much a mammoth, a domesticated mammoth, would cost you to own. There's no data on that.
Yeah, there's also no data on how much it would cost you to buy a mammoth.
That's what I'm saying. So to assume that it would be too expensive, I think is a step too far.
Okay, well, taking a break from that, let's talk about de-extinctifying the direwolf, exactly how they did it. So in the same way, the Colossal didn't just shove mammoth DNA into a mouse to create the woolly mouse. What? I didn't know that was a thing. The approach to de-extinction with the direwolf I think they meant to say mammoth. The extinction for the direwolf involved gene editing and a surrogate. So like I said, they had a surrogate mother.
That's the same way they're doing it for the mammoth.
The gray wolf, the goal isn't to create a living clone of a direwolf, but almost to create a direwolf 2.0 that is functionally similar to the original animal. So it's true, Colossal's de-extinction is different from bringing something back from the dead, and there's a good reason we can't and may never be able to do that.
Yes, because it's an affront to our Lord and Savior.
I was just thinking Jurassic Park still.
We can't play God, Joshua, and some would say that we shouldn't play God.
Some would say that that's just it. If you're playing God, you're not God, but you get to do stuff like him, like create direwolves from Game of Thrones, which you could have cuddled up at your feet at night. That's all I'm saying.
Who says that?
I don't know, dude, but he looks like a great foot warmer and very cuddly. Also, like he could eat all of us, but you know.
He could just hunt. He could just go out and hunt food for you. He'd bring back that big old strong wolf. Could bring back a whole animal for you to butcher, and then you could feed it. You could have it's like the relationship that we began with. I'm assuming dire wolves back in the beginning of our relationship with dogs. Those are probably dire wolves, right?
Dude, how the hell though did they extract DNA from a 13,000-year-old tooth and a 74,000-year-old skull? There was still extractable, readable DNA from a 70. Like, think of the amount of things completely decay and rot. This must have been like completely frozen in permafrost or something. Like how they got usable DNA is incredible. That's that old.
Well, it's not necessarily like when you say usable, it's not like they're using that like I'm assuming what they're doing is because I'm sure that the DNA is degraded at that point to the, they couldn't just pull that DNA out and directly use it. I'm sure they're like reading it.
Yeah.
And copying it. And it's like, think about it.
And then using CRISPR to edit the genes of the existing gray wolf to then produce genes similar to what would be a dire wolf. Not exactly, because we're not raising it from the dead, but we certainly are giving it a new chance. So, but man, I think that about wraps it up. We're at about an hour and 20 minutes here.
All right, I think we've covered about everything we could cover.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching Josh and Ferd vs. the World. If you could drop this video a like, share, subscribe, it really helps the channel grow. We appreciate it.
And as always, you guys be easy.